Welcome to Kizuna, a Teijin Innovation Vodcast. Like Kizuna, the Japanese word for enduring bonds between people, we believe in the power of co-creation when it comes to developing the newest technologies of the future from a holistic perspective. My name is Franziska, I'm an innovation advisor and the host of this podcast. In our first series, we explore the evolving future of mobility. How can we envision the future of mobility? What are the opportunities and challenges, and what can we learn from each other? I'm super excited to discuss these topics with the most fantastic industry experts worldwide. With me, I have our main guest, Latta. Hey, Jay, you are the emerging technology strategist and fusionist when it comes to the topics of mobility and AI. You have led global initiatives for the future of manufacturing, sustainability, and the circular economy. You travel worldwide, meeting the minds of the future and setting the spark. Welcome, Jay. Could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how are you today?
Hey, hello. Well, it's an exciting topic in general. Mobility is not really about the choice or the transportation itself. Mobility is to have a choice to go wherever you want, however you want, and what kind of transportation you take with you. So here, this is of course something very exciting. We are living in exciting times and challenging times as well. But in general, we have this huge shift away from combustion engines towards electrification. We see more interconnectivity. We see smartification of our vehicles. We see a radical shift. And this has as well implications on how we deal with these devices. How will we experience them? How do they experience us? So here it means simply to go along and to find the best fitting solution for any kind of, client or industry.
We have another guest for this episode, Mike Siwajek, VP of R&D at Teijin Automotive Technologies. Welcome, Mike. You have 20 years of experience in the industry. How are you today, and could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
I'm good today. Thanks for having me in this. This is really exciting for me to be a part of this. I've been in the industry, as you said, for over 20 years, and it really seen it evolve from just niche market for our parts to being on global programs, and really watched the transition of the transportation market. From just standard auto, ICE engines to lightweighting, and now we're transitioning into this electrification. So it's an exciting time. A lot of innovation has to happen to meet all the needs, but we're trying. We got a good young team that is working very hard to get there.
Yeah. Before diving into the future with both of you, I really wanted to go one step back. Let's look at the pandemic and what this, changed into the mobility landscape. So what did we learn from the pandemic? How did our mindset change here? And maybe Mike, you can start. How did you experience the pandemic?
Well, from a broad perspective, from the transportation side, at least in the United States, because I think there's a lot less public transportation. It's a lot more individual. The roads were pretty empty for a year or so. It was very interesting to see how people adapted to being at home, and then now it's starting to come back quite strong. As far as an industry is concerned, we never really stopped. The vehicles that we're parts of really never stopped being produced by our customers. So we were trying to work remotely and still keep our factories running, which was a real challenge. And the big challenge moving forward is just that the workforce never really came back. A lot of people stayed home. And so now we're trying to keep up with large volumes and not many people to make parts. So that's the biggest challenge right now. But then also we have the transition to electrification, where we're trying to figure out how we fit onto those vehicles. And work with our customers to get what they need and innovate somewhat remotely. But my team's always, we have equipment, so we were allowed to be here. But most other people outside of the hands-on people stayed home. So it's an interesting time, and we'll see where it goes.
How is working remotely when innovating? Was there a change? Was it difficult for the people not meeting face to face? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my team, since we have to be hands-on with what we're doing. So they were allowed to come in, but had to isolate and take precautions. But for someone like me and people that were managing it, we were at home on Teams meetings, like kind of like we are now, and just trying to make sure we kept the priorities straight and kept people moving forward and met the timelines that were necessary. And I think by and large, people did a really, really fantastic job. So, and my team is mostly, I call them kids, but they, they're a lot more tech savvy and able to utilize those tools that dinosaurs like me aren't so good at. So,
yeah. Jay, what do you say? Like the pandemic, of course, it was a huge event. Where did you see the impacts now and for the future?
Well, the pandemic showed us as first our limits. It showed us, are we prepared or not? It was not the first pandemic, it's not the only one, and it will not be the last one. So here, any kind of findings, any kind of how can we proceed in the future are, of course, a necessary lesson and are welcome. The thing is that, how Mike already said, we've seen empty roads. We've seen, for example, these famous pictures that Venice became completely, unpolluted. When you've been able to see through the water, the ground. What we've seen after the pandemic is how fast we can pollute it again. The necessary shifts in the transportation itself that are required to fight the climate change, to somehow deal with our next future, is of course that public transportation, which is necessary, started to be empty. When people had to go somewhere, they've been using more intensely their private vehicles. But, remote work, we'll see. This whole thing around the necessary infrastructure. When you've seen, for example, in homeschooling, the children sitting in the snow in the garden because the connectivity was in the garden the best, being completely covered by sheets and so on, simply to participate on school. This is as well something that needs to be repaired for the next future. The afterwards implications were quite interesting to see how this emptiness of the streets, how switching to alternatives now start to recover again. Mm-hmm. But with the whole supply chain issues, with going down with your production, with what came after the pandemic, semiconductor shortage, now the war, when raw materials are being, let's say, not so available or not for the prices that we've used to have. Here we see that, for example, the waiting times, if for an average German premium, you wait something around 18 months. So the people started to shift in their own behavior, in their own consumption. So as well, some kind of minimalism, pandemic-induced minimalism, came onto the surface. Mm-hmm. When your closet is full of stuff and you cannot wear it, mm-hmm. so that you start to focus on quality instead of quantity.
How can we use this mindset and this shift, in the mindset for the evolving mobility, for the future mobility, when you think about all these niches that will arise in the near future?
So the people already experienced remote work, unconditional remote work. They have experienced that they don't need a closet full of stuff. They don't need too much of anything. They experience right now as well with not having fully access to a new car when they want to have one, so that they use their old devices slightly longer. So the implications here is longevity, for example. It needs robustness. It needs modularity. It needs as well sharing. What we've seen is that the people are massively ready to share things.
Super interesting. I mean, Mike, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the current hottest trends that you see, especially in the automotive industry, because you're an expert there. What do you see and where does it go? You know, maybe even from a material perspective.
Well, as Jay said, I think we have to shift out of necessity. So whatever, this is an opportunity, is how we have to look at it, is an opportunity to shift the paradigm that we've always had and move towards something that's different and out of necessity. People don't like to change, but when we're forced to, we adapt pretty quickly. And so if we utilize this as a time to be able to inform people and say, we have to think about this moving forward. The supply chain, as Jay mentioned, is a huge problem right now. I mean, and it hasn't gotten better. In fact, it's gotten worse, because I think what happened is in the pandemic, a lot of people figured, oh, we're not going to be manufacturing, we're shutting down, when in fact that wasn't the case. A lot of people kept manufacturing, and there was still a demand. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I know at least in my house with my family and people around me, a lot of people just started being online and purchasing things. Let's buy this. I'm online shopping all day because I have nothing better to do. And what you saw in the U.S. is there's a lot less people going out and doing things, where now you have all these delivery services for groceries and packages and whatever it might be, that the Amazon trucks are flooding the market. You see them up and down our street 7 days a week. And so is that how we move forward? Is it where people are staying home and utilizing services more than doing it themselves? So that would change the consumer vehicle market, or maybe it's more of an industrial market or a fleet vehicle type market. So, I think that's evolving, and we try to stay with it. But again, the supply chain is still very, very, very fragile. And what I think it's caused a lot of companies to start to focus on, okay, what happened during the pandemic? Because as Jay said, it's not the last pandemic. It's not the last disruption we're going to have to our market. So we need to be ready for the next one. And I don't think we'll be fully ready, but I think we understand our business a little better, and looking for backup supply and alternate supply and alternate ideas to do it differently, but also to be prepared for the financial crash that you get, because inflation was a huge hit to everybody's bottom line, and we're still dealing with that today. So there's a lot of things to worry about, but I think it brought into focus some of the things we need to concentrate on and understand a little better.
How would the ideal supply chain look like? What are your ideas when it comes to these topics? It doesn't have to be perfect, but maybe to both of you. Mike, you can start, and then
Yeah. So for us, being a global company, we manufacture on 3-4 continents, and a lot of our systems are proprietary. So we work with one supplier here in the U.S., and they are providing a proprietary solution to us. And now I have to get it to China, or I have to get it to France and manufacture it there. Well, shipping is not easy right now, as with everything else. The time is doubled. So to get something that has a shelf life from the U.S. to Europe or China, by the time it gets there, sometimes it's expired or it gets stuck in customs, and they're trying to meet their customers' demand. So for us, the first thing to do is look at localization of raw materials. So can we get something similar or the same, or by the same company, or through partnerships, without hindering the proprietary nature of it, but also getting them what they need and being able to manufacture the same thing. We say same, but it's got to be, when BMW wants something in Germany, they want the same thing in the US, same thing in Asia. You can't give them 3 different products. They're all tested, for 6 to 10 months, and each part, and you can't just make a quick substitution. It's not that easy. So that's a big challenge. But localization and just trying to work very closely with the supply base and the customer base. They understand the trouble we're having because they're having the same trouble. So we work as partners now, which is actually refreshing.
Cool. So working more together rather than against. Jay, what do you think about this?
Well, Mike mentioned two very important things. The first is what he called localization. When we've been here in our think tank dealing with how should the future look like, how should the global supply chain look like in the future, we've been exploring trends like what we call here distributed manufacturing. So this localization means, in fact, that you are having reliable partners around your manufacturing, where you simply can get the local talents, you onboard them, you share, of course, your knowledge. The second important thing that Mike mentioned is partnerships. These times of this radical competition, they are over. Without collaboration, cooperation, this high-end complexity that we see currently in our supply chains, we cannot survive. So here it goes really more into working together. There is enough space for everyone. So here to implement an ecosystemic thinking. So beside of distributed manufacturing, having this ecosystemic thinking to find the right talents, like in a puzzle piece, and simply when you need an add-on, when you need to change something, you can get another piece that fits a bit better into this overall ecosystem.
Yeah, makes sense. Mike, I really want to dive a little bit more into the materials, right? Maybe you have an example for me and our listeners, to understand this a little bit more. Is there anything you are, you really see the future, in like from a material perspective? Is there something we can talk about to really understand what composites mean in this automotive industry?
Well, yeah, for sure. So, it's funny how we've shifted in just a few short years. 2 or 3 years ago, we were working on the, in the U.S. was called CAFE. It was a 56.5 mile per gallon standard that was being set by the government. So by 2025, we were supposed to all be at 56.5 miles per gallon. So we were all running very fast towards that. And then the pandemic hit, and now it's a pivot to electrification. So everything we did was, I wouldn't say it was useless, but it was, it was set off to the side. But for composites, they all fit together because composites, they lend themselves to lightweight technology. So lightweight is good for fuel economy, but also for electrification. So these batteries, if you haven't seen them, they're very large and they're very heavy. So the more weight we can take out of a vehicle, the better the ranges of a battery. So that's important. But also composites lend themselves to being very flexible for design and manufacturing and for lower cost tooling than us. And they also we can put chemistry into the materials that wouldn't have to be added on. For example, if you had an aluminum battery tray, you might have to put some sort of coating on the outside to make it flame retardant or protective, and where we can actually put that chemistry right into the material and be net shape. We don't have to stamp it and worry about seams and leaking and things like that. We can actually mold it into a shape. So, but one thing that as Teijin being a very big materials type company is we can focus on multi-materials. So we can look at, we have a good piece over here. So in the US, what my group does, what Teijin Automotive is very big in is body panels. So if you look at, we do the entire body of the exterior of the Corvette, and exterior. We're on there's a Lotus vehicle being manufactured now, and we're always been very big in that. And now we can adapt those to underbody and interior parts. And what we're really working on right now, you ask about the future, is battery enclosures. So the current battery technologies can be dangerous if they're short-circuited or get wet. So what we create a battery enclosure that has flame retardant properties for what they call thermal runaway. So we are very successful with that, and it's a very big product globally for us. In China, I think we have over 30 vehicles that we're on, and in the US it's starting to grow, and in Europe as well. So my team is working very hard on that because there's a lot of very difficult chemistry to figure out, and a lot of the market changes very quickly. A year ago, we had one test, and then everybody said, oh, that test isn't important anymore. Now we have this new test. And we're like, wait, we've been working for 3 years to pass that one test. And now you tell us in 2 months, oh, yeah, you're on this vehicle, but now you got to pass this test. So you have to be very flexible, but, adapt very quickly. And again, be communicative with your customers and your supply base, because as the market changes, we all have to think together and shift. By the way, get raw materials that we don't have. So, I was going to mention, Jay mentioned about being collaborative and not being competitive. In the U.S., we had a very big shortage in a certain raw material just recently, and we were actually calling a lot of our competitors, and we were sharing raw materials because, we compete, but not directly on a lot of things. And to keep the industry moving forward, we can help you here if you can help us there. And it's been an interesting time where you're seeing a lot of competitors work on, trying to help each other out just to keep everything moving forward for our market. And that also lends, sustainability is becoming a big challenge for composites, and we're all trying to work together and say, how do we work together to keep us relevant as the future comes? So it's an exciting time, but it's challenging as well.
Yeah. Maybe Jay, what does it mean for the user? Like me, for example. What does these new materials mean really? What would you say?
Well, what does it mean for you? One aspect from the pandemic that we've seen is, of course, in the beginning, everyone was scared, like, how is it with the virus on surfaces? How long does it stay on metal, on leather, on paper, and so on? So here, of course, one need in the whole transportation sector that came up is sanitization, self-disinfectant surfaces, self-cleaning surfaces. Is it something that will be treated with ultraviolet light if it's in the C bandwidth, if we use heat treatment, if we use some kind of steam, whatever. So many people came along and tried to figure out what might be the best solution. This has as well implications on the materials, because if you use massively ultraviolet light, then maybe your leather starts to become crumpy, starts to age faster. If you use, let's say, some kind of steam treatment or heat treatment, you cannot leave your groceries in the vehicle. Or how is it, for example, if you leave your pet inside? So many questions that needed to be answered immediately. This is where the main magic from material science, and in my opinion, the next future will be heavily dominated by any kind of material science company, because lightweighted, because sustainability are not just whitewashing or greenwashing terms, not anymore. We have to face it. I know one automotive player that started because of these shortages of raw materials that are becoming more and more expensive. He started simply to buy out his former competition. If you have a German premium vehicle from the mid-90s, the alloys are different than what we use now. So the materials back in time were purer. So you can take, let's say, the platinum from a catalyst from one of these mid-90s vehicle and produce 5 normally, or right now modern made catalysts. So they are trying to bypass through reusing. So they are really living this circular economy right now, because what is waste from the one can be a valuable resource for the other. We are dealing with cooling all of our electronics. Connected smart vehicles have a tremendous compute power inside. It needs to be cooled. So here we can embed into these systems with metamaterials or with 3D or printable materials, micro groovings, small channels to cool the batteries, the electronics, and so on. So many things are coming into the game. What does it mean for you as end user, more or less, is hopefully affordability. Because if we can on demand get the right materials for you, it will be an easier thing. instead of adapting, coating, whatever, doing some kind of magic simply to make it, but even then raising an overall complexity. So the more you can tailor materials, the more lightweighted they can be. This means less raw materials to be used. It can be lighter, it can be more affordable, and of course, therefore, easier to access.
Great, super, super interesting. Mike, one last thing about developing these materials. What would you say, where do the biggest difference lie? I mean, from Japan to the US, you just said it, where are the difference at the moment, and where are some challenges that we need to overcome? Because we talked about partnerships already, but where are the challenges at the moment in these countries?
Well, as the markets evolve, they evolve at different speeds. So China was quick to embrace electrification, and I was just reading about the European Commission just put out a report about that. At the Paris show, that was mostly Chinese vehicles there because they're there already, and people are still the other automotive suppliers in Europe and the US are still trying to decide where they want to go. GM and Volkswagen went full in on electrification, where you see someone like Toyota saying, well, it's not all about electrification. It's about carbon neutral. It's about trying to find good solutions for to meet these sustainability goals. So I think we're going to start to see a little bit of diversification in how people attack these problems. Is it hydrogen fuel cells? Is it hybrids? Hybrids, there's still I think what we're going to find is, there's a lot of mandates out there right now, but there's not enough battery grade lithium and nickel to go around if everybody goes to these batteries. So, how do we adapt to that? And then and people are smart, they're going to find other ways around that. So you're going to look at, solid state batteries may come along, and we're not going to need these big flame retardant materials that I'm making now. So how do I prepare myself and be ready for what's next? So we have to be in touch with our customers, and we have to work directly with them. What I'm seeing in all markets right now is there's a lot of government funding of innovation. So we run projects here in the United States that are funded by the Department of Energy, and we're working with our customers as the OEM and our supply base. And there are these consortiums or collaborations where we're all working towards a single problem. The same thing's happening in Europe. The European OEMs are very, very keen to work with their supply base to get the solutions they need, that they think they need. And then in Asia, China can sometimes be a little bit rogue, but we have to adapt because sometimes they don't question, they just do. And then we gotta respond and figure out, what are the repercussions of that. So, I guess I'm going around your question, but it's different in all regions. So we have to stay in touch with all of our global entities, especially like Teijin. But so we all understand what we're all working on. We have to be communicative. We can't hide from each other that we want to take credit. There's nothing about credit anymore. It's what's best for the company, and what's best for the consumer, what's best for the market, and what's best for the earth. I think we need to be a lot more responsible than we have been in the past.
Yeah.
And that's you have to have that. You have to have a conscience about what you're doing, and I think it's the pandemic's forced us to do that. We just hope it doesn't go backwards. We want to keep moving forwards.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say, Jay? What do you think, zooming out, let's ask the fusionist, what would you say are the differences from your perspective?
So I see a huge difference between a data-aware automotive player and a classic company that more or less lost its core competence. The core competence of classic automotives was the combustion engine. This is something we all agree is done. So here right now, the refocus onto software-defined vehicles to figure out how these new vehicle architectures should look like. This is the key right now, to understand the value of data, and out of this to understand a platform standardization to deal with this. Sharing. When Mike mentioned that competition now is being a bit overcome right now, that they are more working together. I observe this as well. Here, a second big trend that we see here is called shared manufacturing. When one of these automotive players has a platform that is offering on the market that it can be reused. So remonetizing your platform, which means, of course, if you use already my platform, hey, use my manufacturing facility. I mean, development of a vehicle costs $800 million. A manufacturing facility, additional 1.2 till 1.6 billion. So, of course, we need to keep all of this stuff ongoing. If we cannot produce the full amount of vehicles, we need to share these capacities. So this is, of course, one thing. Where I'm not so positive is the profit orientation. The radical profit orientation does not work anymore, because this is where majority of our problems comes around the corner. So here a bit more into what is enough. How can we collaborate, cooperate, and co-create? So this is the trend towards future, to set up a different baseline, to meet the needs. When Mike mentioned towards the customer, towards the planet, super important. I fully agree. Right now, we still struggle a bit. And when he mentioned fuel cells, hybrids, and so on, completely right. In, let's say, north of Europe, we need a different type of mobility than in south of Europe, than in the Emirates, than in the US. It's simply there is not a one-size-fits-all solution anymore. So here it really comes into what do we really need? How can we make it modular as possible to fit even in the future the needs?
Mm-hmm. Feels like the people really become center to these problems, right? Like what fits the people in the end as well. Let's zoom out even more, like let's dive deep into the future. So we said, okay, let's turn mobility into an infrastructure, right? Mike, how do you envision mobility 2050? Like, what do you see, on the streets? Where do you see yourself?
The U.S. is a funny beast. People like their big cars, people like their power, but if you've driven some of these electric vehicles, they're very fun to drive. They're you have the motors on each wheel, and they're instant torque, and you are going from zero to fast very quickly. So I think people, once they get past the change, they're going to embrace it. I would, personally would like to see. I love going to Europe and Asia and using public transportation. I just think it's so convenient and so smart. And but in the U.S., it's not something anybody's very interested in. But two, it's very difficult because, as you said, there's no infrastructure. So to build all that infrastructure takes a lot of money and a lot of people and a lot of time and some vision and people to agree on things. And in our country, we don't have a lot of agreement right now. So I still see a personal transportation market. I think they're even Uber. Everybody's an Uber driver now. So but they're still using their own vehicles. So there'll still be a vehicle market. I see it shrinking, and what we've seen, at least with our customer base, is we're seeing smaller volumes, and I think Jay mentioned it, of more uniform architectures that they put a little twist on for each specific vehicle, or intent for the vehicle. So I think we're going to start seeing a better understanding of how this electrification will work, and where what's available, and can we do battery technology for such a large number of vehicles? Because as these these vehicles start to go to junkyards or be recycled, we have to find what's next. So it's a big challenge. I think we really I'm really working on the what's next and trying to adapt, but looking farther out, it's a difficult picture because it's different in all the different regions for us.
Mm-hmm. But still, there's a lot of opportunity in it, I guess.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Especially
There's a lot to do.
Now from the material perspective, Yeah, I mean, Jay, what would you say? Like, how do you envision mobility in 2050?
Funny thing, I had recently a workshop in one of the Middle East areas to describe or to answer exactly these kind of questions. So what we will see is definitely more smartification. We will have a higher density of connectivity, where vehicles have to talk with each other, where they have to talk with the infrastructure. Public transportation in Europe is fun. There is definitely potential for more. Um, Areas like in the US, for example, here I see a huge potential for self-driving vehicles that simply, without the Uber driver, will drive you wherever you need. So this personal connectivity, we talk here about cocooning. When you enter a vehicle and simply everything what you are familiar to do simply follows you. It's part of your personal ecosystem. So here, having these connected vehicles that can adapt onto your needs, where the most important is, however, a smartphone in the future will look like. But this will stay the most important. You will order it. Your only concern will be, can I afford premium, or do I pay just the cheaper price? If it swims, if it flies, if it submerges, if it drives, how many wheels it will have, you will not really care. If we can set up, let's say in the US, we have this very strong initiatives towards Hyperloop. So this kind of super fast transportation method, we'll see. An additional potential is in advanced air mobility. When in the US, this Pony Express feeling, hopping from one small point to another to get fast across the country, might be something with smaller devices that can carry, let's say, up to 5 or 9 passengers, and simply providing multiple services, connecting all of these different small regional airports and airfields. We see in Amsterdam were tested autonomous boats, so-called rowboats, where you simply call via an app one of these devices, and it drives you across the channels wherever you need to be. So we will see a Cambrian explosion of mobility devices serving the necessary needs. There, again, not a one size fits all. Maybe in California will be a slightly different infrastructure for mobility than in Texas. Fair enough, it's okay, as long we as consumers will have a seamless mobility app that we do not need to install in every city something specific. It needs to be seamless. And of course, my personal well-being, my personal mobility behavior needs to be served by this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything else is irrelevant. We will find a solution.
Yes, and going even more into the future, does a car, transportation look like a car now, right? What can we do in this space when we move from A to B? That's also really interesting, I think. How will this change, right? What we do with spaces there, also with parking spaces, because there will be a lot of parking spaces in the future as well. One last question that I have is, from a very personal perspective, right? What are you most excited about when you think about the evolving mobility? Maybe Mike, you can start. And yeah, try to keep it personal, because I feel like this is something has to do with excitement, and I really want to know your thoughts on this. And yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Excitement. I'm pretty boring person. But I do, like I mentioned, I do like, new technology, and trying to stay, with something interesting and different. It's always fun to move on to what's next. My car is 7, 8 years old now, and I'm starting to shop for the next one. And I'm weighing that. Do I go full electric, full hybrid? Or a hybrid, or stay with one last ICE engine, and you want to be responsible, but you want the best. But in shopping for that, I'm seeing some really interesting, as Jay said, the smart features of the new vehicles. I was at an award show this week, and they had a new Rivian all electric SUV, and some of the connectivity and the options within the passenger car are just so fascinating. How quickly where did this come from? This was a new company a few years ago, and we work with them on certain vehicles, and then you're seeing these beautiful interiors with vegan leather and a lot of different features in the vehicle. I'm still a little skeptical about, at least in the U.S., about autonomous driving, because we're such a litigious society that the OEMs are very skittish about that right now. So, but it will get there. It's just I think it's a little slower here. But those are the kind of things where, as you start to interact with your vehicle and it's more personalized, that's exciting to me. And, and again, I like technology. I like the new and shiny and so it's fun to see what's next and get out there and check it out. And then, eventually I'll pull the trigger and buy something. But no, that's really for me what's interesting. And I have 4 children, and they're all, they're young and idealistic, and they're more about the economy or the ecology of it and the sustainability. And just as Jay said, I need to get from here to there. How do I get there? And what's the easiest and least obtrusive way for me to get there? It doesn't have to be a cool car that Dad wants. It just has to get me there. So I like to watch my kids and see how life evolves for them, because it's obviously gonna be different than what we're doing. But it's an interesting time. As an R&D guy, it's always interesting, because there's always a new challenge right around the corner that we like to solve problems. That's, if we're not solving problems, we're bored. So let's have more problems, but good problems, not bad problems. Like no more supply chain issues. No, thank you. Let's work on inventing something new, because that's fun.
Wonderful. Yeah, it was great having you. I think thank you so much for your time as well. And maybe Jay, you could say your answer to this question. Like, what are you most excited about when you think about the future or the evolving mobility from your perspective?
Well, I'm a crazy person, so I need to experience things. Otherwise, I cannot have a valid opinion about it. So as long as I'm on this planet, I've been trying out things. So I have, for example, a boating license. I love to sail. I have as well a pilot license, simply to get an idea, to see this beauty, to experience it by myself. Of course, as well, driving all of these ground-based vehicles. So what I see for the future, what excites me really very much, is that there might be, following the sustainability and eco-friendly approach, that we might have an era back again with Zeppelins, all of these airships, that even right now some people are thinking about to revive sail ships for cargo transportation. So it will be a huge mixture of possibilities. When we are looking into urban space, beside of public transportation, I've seen, for example, in Berlin recently, a small vehicle that is a 2-seater where you sit in a tandem configuration. It feels like a jet. So when you are driving faster, the vehicles extend a bit so that you are more stable, but still 2 of these vehicles can share one lane, one direction. So this is really something that shows me we've not become too lazy. We are still ready to reinvent, to rethink. It just needs to be sexy enough to be accepted on the market. But me personally, beside of public transportation, so the basic need to go from A to B, we will see as well personal, let's say, a personal statement. So I'm guessing if we ever will have fully autonomous vehicles on the streets, people will shift towards analog mobility when they want to have this feeling of freedom. So more motorcycles, really getting away from this digital that is just this infrastructure. And if you want to express yourself, have fun, that you will bicycle a bit more, ride a motorcycle, or do whatever you want.
Isn't it that also, like, the sound of a motorcycle really leads to this feeling of freedom? I was just hearing that Hans Zimmer is composing like music for an electric car, so like I think people are trying with autonomous driving, but in the end, a motorcycle is a motorcycle, and it makes a certain sound that really gives that idea of freedom. yeah, I'm super impressed, that you shared your thoughts with me. I cannot only thank you, Mike, for being here. I know it's like morning where you are, right?
Yeah, it's morning, but I'm
Yes.
here. This is normal time for me. So it's
Yeah.
been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And speak soon. Finally, for me, this really was super interesting. What really stood out for me is like we need to build an infrastructure, turning mobility into an infrastructure that really differs from place to place. We need to work together, not only as companies and partners, but maybe also as humans, right? To really develop the newest technologies of tomorrow for the future. I really enjoyed having you here, Jay, as well. Do you have something like a last thought, for the audience that you would like to share?
Of course. On the one hand, it's the mission of this vodcast. And you've mentioned it several times, the human. So here, every kind of finding that we had in the past that even right now shows us where our limits are. It's for humans, from humans. This will become one of the most important imperatives for the future. We are one. We are one on this planet. So this means we have to behave like we love the planet and we love to each other. So from humans, for humans, and let's explore what the future keeps us for us, right?
Yeah, I think so as well. There are many more topics that we're going to explore here at Kizuna. And as you said, I think the circular economy, sustainability are not only words, they are the reality and we have to live them. And the selection of materials could be one thing, or is a very important key element, I would say, that leads the way in this transformation. So I'm super excited to speak to other industry experts worldwide in the next episodes. Thank you so much for having me. Please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any suggestions. And if you want to talk about the newest technologies, you can always contact us. Thank you so much for having us and have a great day.